My mother-in-law installed a hidden camera in our home. Not a security system. We had one of those already, mounted visibly at the front door and the garage. Urine. The standard deterrent that announces itself because its presence is the point. This was different. This was a camera disguised as a smoke detector, positioned in the corner of our living room ceiling, angled to capture the couch, the coffee table, the television, the ordinary furniture of a life being lived without awareness of an audience. I found it on a Tuesday afternoon in November. Standing on a chair, changing a light bulb in the living room. Our ceilings are 10 feet, and I needed the chair. And I was eye level with the smoke detector when I noticed it. The details were wrong, e.t. The vents were not vents. There was a lens where there should have been a sensor indicator. I have the specific visual precision of a woman who spent 4 years as a forensic accountant before transitioning to corporate compliance. And I know what belongs where, and this did not belong. I got down from the chair. I stood in my living room. I looked at the device for a long time, then I did what a forensic accountant does when she encounters something that doesn't belong. I documented it before I touched it. I photographed it from every angle. I noted the position, the coverage area, the approximate field of view. I performed the same systematic observation I had learned to perform over years of finding the things in financial records that people had hoped no one would find. Then I stood in the middle of my living room, and I thought about every moment that had occurred in this room in the past. I did not yet know how long it had been there. My children played in this room. 18. My husband and I had conversations in this room. I had cried on that couch, had fought and reconciled and sat in silence, and laughed at things that were only funny to us. All of it, potentially, recorded. By my mother-in-law. In my own house. I thought I knew what I was going to find when I pulled the footage. I did not know what I was going to find. Stay with me, Eb. I want to tell you this carefully, because what I found was not the thing I expected, and the not expected thing changed everything I thought I was angry about, and everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Subscribe if you're new. And if you have ever gone looking for one truth and found a different one, this is for you. My name is Nora. I am 38 years old. I am a corporate compliance officer at a mid-size financial services firm in Boston, which means my entire professional function is finding the gap between what an organization says it's doing and what it's actually doing. I audit, I investigate. I follow the paper trail to the place it leads, regardless of whether that place is convenient for anyone. I did not expect to deploy these skills in my marriage. I grew up in upstate New York, the daughter of 2 engineers who raised me with the specific values of people who build things for a living. Precision, structural integrity, the understanding that what holds a thing up must be sound, or the thing will eventually fall. I carry those values. They are useful professionally, and occasionally inconvenient personally, because a person trained to find the structural weakness in any system will, eventually, find it everywhere she looks. My husband's name is James. He is 41. He is a pediatric surgeon, a man of extraordinary competence in his professional domain, genuinely kind in the way that surgeons who work with children tend to be, present in a crisis, and sometimes absent from the ordinary days that surround it. We have been married for 7 years. We have 2 children, a son named Oliver who is 5, and a daughter named May who is 3. We live in a house we chose together in a suburb of Boston, with good schools and a yard and neighbors who wave. His mother's name is Constance. Constance is 64 years old, and she is, without qualification, the most complex person I have encountered in my personal life, which is a sentence I offer, not as an attack, but as the most accurate description available. She is intelligent and perceptive, and possessed of the specific capability of a woman who raised a child largely alone. James's father left when James was 7, a fact that shaped both of them in ways neither fully acknowledges. She loves James with an intensity that has never entirely redistributed itself toward his adult life and the family he has built within it. She loves Oliver and May with genuine warmth. Her relationship with me has always been, in the diplomatic language I deploy when I describe it to colleagues, navigational. We are two precise women with different ideas about the household we are both, in different capacities, invested in. We have never been enemies. We have never been warm people. We have been two people managing a relationship because we love the same people and are intelligent enough to understand that the relationship requires management. The camera was not management. The camera was something else entirely. I need to tell you about the 3 months before I found the camera, because context is not decoration. It is structure, and without it the story doesn't hold its own weight. In August, Constance had begun spending more time at our house. This was not unusual in itself. She visited regularly. She was involved with the children. James valued her presence in a way that I respected, even when I found it occasionally suffocating. But the August through October period was different in degree. She was there 4 days a week, sometimes 5. She had a key, which she had always had, but she was using it at hours that suggested her comings and goings had become less coordinated with our schedule and more coordinated with her own. I raised it with James in October. I said that I appreciated his mother's involvement with the children, and that I wanted to talk about the frequency and the scheduling, because Dewey's arriving home from work to find her in my kitchen without prior notice was affecting my ability to decompress in my own home. James listened. He validated the concern in the specific way of a man who has been in couples therapy. We had done 2 years of it, 4 years into our marriage. For the ordinary reasons that people do couples therapy, and which had been genuinely useful. He said he would talk to her. He appeared to talk to her. The frequency reduced slightly in November. 2 weeks into November, I found the camera. I did not immediately connect these two facts. I should have. A compliance officer should have. But I was inside the system, which is the permanent limitation of internal audit. And inside the system the connections are harder to draw. The device was a commercially available product. This I determined within 20 minutes of photographing it. Through a reverse image search of the model visible in my photographs. It was sold on several mainstream retail sites, marketed to parents monitoring babysitters, to homeowners monitoring for break-ins, to people who had legitimate reasons for wanting to see what happened in a room when they were not in it. It had a cloud storage function. The footage was stored on a server, accessible through an app, password protected, accessible to whoever had created the account. I am a compliance officer. I know about digital evidence. I know that accessing someone else's account without authorization is a legal matter that requires careful navigation. I called a lawyer before I did anything else, a privacy attorney I had worked with professionally, who I trusted to tell me what I could and could not do with what I had found. She told me. I followed her guidance. The details of that process I am not going to provide, because they are legally specific and not the point of this story. What matters is that through a legal process with appropriate documentation and the involvement of counsel, I accessed the footage. The camera had been installed 6 weeks earlier, in late September. 2 weeks before I had spoken to James about his mother's increased presence, and 4 weeks before the presence had reduced. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, and I began to watch. I want to tell you what I expected to find and what I actually found, because the gap between them is the story. What I expected, evidence of what Constance was looking for. Whatever had driven her to install a camera in my living room. Evidence that I was an insufficient mother, an unstable wife, a person behaving in some way she could document and use. I expected to find her building a case against me, because that was the explanation that organized the available evidence. Camera in my house, installed without my knowledge by a woman who had always viewed me with measured skepticism. The case made itself. What I found was different. Either. The first week of footage was largely ordinary. Our family moving through our living room, in the way families move through living rooms. Oliver building with blocks. May. Watching her preferred cartoon, with the focused intensity she brings to everything. James and I eating takeout on the couch, on a Thursday when I was too tired to cook. The footage was an invasion regardless of its contents. And I felt the invasion as I watched it. The specific violation of having been observed without consent, in the private motion of your own life. Then. But in the second week, something appeared that I had not expected. James, on a Tuesday afternoon. A Tuesday when I was at work, and the children were at school. And Constance, the footage showed, had arrived at 9 in the morning. They sat in the living room together. James was in his surgical scrubs, which meant he had come from the hospital. He sat on the couch, and Constance sat in the chair across from him, and for 47 minutes. I timed it. They talked. I could not hear the conversation. The camera was video only, no audio pickup at that range. But I could see James's face. I have known James's face for 9 years. I know his professional face, his private face, the specific face he makes when he is managing emotion in a clinical context, and the specific face he makes when the management fails. I know what he looks like when he is tired, and when he is afraid, and when he is performing fine while not being fine. On that Tuesday on my couch, talking to his mother, James was not fine. The footage showed him with his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands for several minutes, while Constance sat across from him, with an expression I had never seen on her face, directed at anyone except her grandchildren. Unguarded, gentle, afraid. I watched my husband fall apart in my living room on a Tuesday afternoon while I was at work, and I had not known. I watched all 6 weeks of footage over 2 days. I called in sick on Wednesday. Genuinely, in the sense that I was not capable of performing my professional function while processing what I was watching. I sat at my kitchen table with coffee that went cold and I watched. There were 7 Tuesday visits. James came from the hospital each time. Constance arrived before him and left after him. The conversations were always on the couch, always extended, always with the specific body language of 2 people in the middle of something serious. 3 weeks in, James arrived carrying a document. I could not read it from the camera angle, but I could see it was a document of several pages, printed, with what appeared to be a letterhead. He set it on the coffee tables between them. Constance read it. When she looked up, he was crying. Constance, who I had never seen cry in 7 years, was crying in my living room on a Tuesday afternoon. James reached across and took her hand. I paused the footage. I sat in my kitchen. I am a compliance officer. I follow evidence. The evidence in front of me was not evidence of the thing I had been afraid of, not a husband behaving badly, not a mother-in-law compiling a case against me. The evidence in front of me was evidence of a man in a crisis he had been managing in secret, with the one person he had apparently decided he could bring it to. In my living room, while I was at work. The camera Constance had installed to watch my house had accidentally documented what my husband had been hiding from me. I called James that evening, after the children were in bed. Not called. I waited for him to come home, and I sat at the kitchen table, and when he came in from the garage and saw my face, he stopped in the doorway. He said, "What happened?" I said, "Sit down." He sat. I told him about the camera. I watched his face move through several things: surprise, then the specific expression of a person locating the implications of an unexpected development, then something that looked like relief, and alarmed me precisely because it looked like relief. He said, "My mother installed a camera." I said, "Yes." He said, "In our living room." I said, "Yes." He said, "How long ago?" He said, 6 weeks. He was quiet. He looked at the table, then he said very quietly, "Did you watch the footage?" I said, "Yes." He looked up, and the expression on his face was not guilt. It was the expression of a man who has been carrying something in a closed room and has just been told the door is open. He said, I was going to tell you. I said, Eat play. Tell me now. What James told me took 2 hours. I want to tell it to you the way he told it to me. Not as a list of facts, but as the shape of a thing that had been building for longer than I had known, in the specific way that the things our partners carry alone build without our awareness, until the weight becomes visible. In June, James had found something in a routine physical. An abnormality, not a diagnosis, not yet, Ipwale. But an abnormality significant enough that his physician had referred him to a specialist. He had gone to the specialist in July without telling me. The specialist had ordered further testing, Inchin. The testing had produced results that were, in the specialist's language, requiring of monitoring and possible intervention. James was a surgeon, Eni. He understood the medical language in a way that most people who receive that language do not. He understood it the way I understand a financial irregularity. Not just the surface meaning but the implications, the range of outcomes, the statistical shape of what requiring of monitoring means when you are a physician reading your own results. He had been afraid, Ibi. He had not told me because, and this is the part I have turned over most, the part I have brought to our couple's therapist and examined from every angle. He had not told me because of the children. Specifically, Yvir. He had not wanted me to be afraid while the outcome was uncertain. He knew me, he said. He knew that I would research everything, that I would find the range of outcomes, that I would carry the worst case as a contingency, that I would be afraid every day until there was a resolution. He had wanted to protect me from the daily fear of an uncertain outcome. He had brought it to his mother instead, Constance, who had raised him alone. Constance, Ubifine, who had sat with him through the fear he had not learned to bring to a partner. Constance, whose presence in our house 4 days a week had not been about watching me, had been about watching her son, about being near him while he was afraid, about being the person she had always been to him in the specific way she had been that person before I existed in his life. Ibi. The document on the coffee table had been a treatment plan. I am going to be honest about what I felt because I think honesty is the only thing worth offering here, and performed equanimity is something I do not have patience for. I felt relief first. This surprises people when I tell them, but it is true, Ibi. I felt relief that the secret was not what I had feared, that my husband had not been behaving in the way that the camera's existence had half suggested to my worst-case mind. The secret was a health crisis managed privately, not a betrayal. Relief, then I felt the grief that lives underneath the relief when the relief clears space for it. My husband had been afraid for 5 months, Ibi. He had sat in my living room on 7 Tuesdays, with his face in his hands, and I had been at work and I had not known. He had received a treatment plan and shared it with his mother, and had not told me, He had made a decision, from love, from the specific love of a person trying to protect someone from pain, that I was not the person he could bring this to. I sat with that grief. I did not perform my way through it, I let it be the size it actually was. Then I said, James, I needed to know. I know. I said, not after the fact, while it was happening. I needed to be in it with you while it was happening. He said, I know, you. I'm sorry. I said, the protection wasn't protection. It was isolation. I have been living next to your fear for 5 months, and I didn't know what I was living next to. And that meant I couldn't be with you in it. And you were alone in it, and that is not what we are supposed to be. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I know. I knew it was wrong. I just didn't know how to start the sentence. I said, Ebel, you start it the same way you'd start any sentence. You say my name, and you tell me the next true thing. I want to tell you about Constance, because she is the complicated center of this story, and she deserves a complexity that is not reduced to villain. I called her the morning after my conversation with James, Evie. I had spent the night cycling between the valid anger at the invasion. She had installed a camera in my home without my consent, which is a legal violation and a personal one, and is not excused by her motivation. and the more complicated understanding of what the camera had been for, she answered. He knew why I was calling. James had apparently called her the night before to tell her I had found it. She said, before I could begin, I owe you an apology. I said, you do, she said. I was watching him, not you. Keep. I need you to understand that. I said, I do understand that. It doesn't change what you did, she said. I know. I said, you installed a camera in my home without telling me or asking me, and you stored footage of my children and my marriage and my private life on a server I didn't know existed. Whatever your reason was, you did that, she said. Yes. I said, why didn't you come to me, when he told you in September? Why didn't you call me and say, James is afraid and he isn't telling Nora and I think Nora should know? There was a pause. Then she said, because he asked me not to. I said, he asked you not to tell me. She said, he said he needed time. He said he would tell you when he had more information. He said, she stopped. He said he needed somewhere to put it while he figured out how to bring it to you. And I was that somewhere. And I should have pushed him harder. I should have told him that keeping it from you was wrong. Phoebe, I didn't push hard enough. I said no. You didn't. She said, I've been his somewhere since he was 7 years old. It is a very old habit. The treatment, for those who are wondering, James received it. It was an intervention. I will not specify beyond that, because the medical details belong to him and he is a private person, which I now understand more completely than I did before November. The outcome has been, at the 14-month mark, what his physicians describe as favorable. He has follow-up monitoring on a schedule. He is, by every available measure, well. I tell you this not because favorable outcomes are a requirement for this story to matter, either, but because you will want to know, and I would rather tell you than leave you in the uncertainty that my husband chose to spare me from, and that I am now choosing not to spare you from, because I believe people can handle uncertain information when they are given it with honesty and context. We are in couples therapy again. The same therapist, people, who received the summary of the preceding 6 months, with the professional equanimity of someone who has heard most of what human relationships produce, and is genuinely unshockable. We are working on the specific work that this particular crisis made necessary. James's relationship with protection as a love language that becomes its own form of withholding. My own ability to signal that I am a person who can hold difficult information without requiring rescue from it. The way two people build a shared container, strong enough for the things neither of them wants to carry alone. It is work, it is worth it. Constance, she is no longer welcome to come to our home without an invitation. This is a boundary James and I established together. He was the one who proposed it, which mattered to me. The key was returned. The camera was removed. The account was deleted. She has respected the boundary without requiring repeated enforcement, which I credit to her intelligence and to the specific shame of a woman who installed a camera to watch her son and produced a documentation of her own overreach. She is not without self-awareness. She deployed that self-awareness in the wrong direction for decades, but she is capable of recognizing when she has gone too far. She and I had a longer conversation in February. A real one, not the initial accountability call. I drove to her apartment, which is 30 minutes from our house, and we sat at her kitchen table and we talked for 3 hours. She told me things about James's childhood that I had not fully known. The specific texture of raising a child alone. The bond that forms between a mother and a son when the father who was supposed to be there is not. The way Constance had been not just his mother but his primary relationship for 15 years before he was old enough to have others. She told me she had known, intellectually, that this bond required renegotiation when he married. She had not known, emotionally, how to do the renegotiation without feeling like she was losing the thing that had held her together. She said, I have always been afraid that if he didn't need me I would disappear. I said, that's not how people work, she said. I know that. I know that intellectually. I said, he loves you. His children love you. T. That is not contingent on being his crisis container. She looked at her hands. Then she looked at me. She said, I never thought you were bad for him. I want you to know that, Ebel. I know I didn't make it easy for you to feel that, but I never thought you were bad for him. I said, I know. She said, what I thought was that you didn't need him the way I needed him, you. That you were sufficient and self-contained, and he would dissolve into you and I would lose him. I said. He didn't dissolve. He held himself back from me when he was afraid. That's the opposite of what you were worried about. She said, yes. I see that now. I said the camera was looking for the wrong thing. She said, yes. I want to talk about the camera itself, even outside of Constance's particular story, because I think it represents something worth naming directly. We live in a moment when surveillance is more accessible than it has ever been, either. The device Constance used cost $47. It took approximately 4 minutes to install. It stored 6 weeks of footage on a remote server, accessible from a phone. These tools exist and are widely available, and are used, regularly, by people who justify their use in the language of protection, or love, or care. Surveillance is not love. I want to say that as plainly as I know how. In Baynes. Surveillance is the replacement of trust with documentation. It is the decision that what someone might be doing is more important than their right to be unwatched in their own home. Either. It is the conversion of a relationship into a monitoring system. And monitoring systems are not relationships. They are the structure you install when you have decided that the relationship cannot be trusted to produce the information you need. Constance did not trust that she could ask James directly how he was. She did not trust that he would tell her. She installed a camera instead, and the camera gave her footage of her son, afraid on my couch, which she already knew, and footage of my children playing, and my marriage existing, and my private life proceeding, which she had no right to. They. The information the camera produced that she did not expect. My discovery of it, and through it, the discovery of what James been keeping from me, was the direct consequence of choosing surveillance over conversation. Either. This is what surveillance produces, not the information you were looking for, but everything else. It captures the full field, not the specific thing you aimed it at. Constance aimed it at James and captured my marriage. The camera does not narrow, it widens. And the things it captures that you did not intend to capture have a way of producing consequences you did not intend to produce. If you are considering whether to install a camera in someone's home, anyone's home, for any reason, I want you to hold that the camera does not give you the conversation you needed to have. It gives you footage. And footage is not the same as truth. It is evidence of surface behavior without access to interior meaning, and human beings who are suffering do not suffer on their surfaces. They suffer underneath, in the places a camera cannot reach. Have the conversation. James and I talk differently now. This is the change that surprised me most, not its occurrence, but its texture. I expected that the crisis and its aftermath would produce more communication, which it has. I did not expect the communication to feel qualitatively different. James tells me when he is afraid. Not always immediately. He is still, by temperament, a person who processes internally before he speaks. And I am not asking him to become someone he isn't. But he tells me, He told me in April when a follow-up result came back ambiguous, and he was waiting for a second opinion. He told me on the day he was waiting, not 3 months later. He called me from the hospital parking lot because he needed to say it out loud to someone who was not his mother. I drove to the hospital. I sat in the car with him, in the parking lot, for 40 minutes. We did not resolve the ambiguity that required the second opinion, which came back clear. But we sat in it together, which is the thing he had not allowed in the 6 months before November. I said, in the car, This is what I needed, not the resolution. This, he said, I know. I'm sorry it took so long to understand that. I said, you understand it now. He said, yes, that was enough. Geeta. Not because the preceding 6 months didn't matter, they did. And we have worked on them and continue to. But because enough is its own category, separate from perfect. And in marriage I have found that enough, any, consistently offered, and honestly meant, is actually what sustains things, not the grand gesture. The parking lot. Oliver asked me recently where the smoke detector in the living room went. He is 5. And he notices absences the way children notice the changed shape of a room. Something was there and now is not, and he wants to account for it. I said, we got a better one and moved it to the hallway. He said, does it still work? I said, yes. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. He nodded and went back to his blocks. I stood in the living room for a moment after he said that. Bettine. In the corner of the ceiling where the camera had been there is now a small circle of slightly different paint. The mark of a thing removed. The trace evidence of something that was there and is no longer. In a year the paint will have faded to match, and you will not be able to tell. I think about what this room held in those 6 weeks. My children, my husband's fear, even my ordinary life moving through its ordinary motions without knowing it was being watched. Hebel. I think about the 7 Tuesdays and James, with his face in his hands, and Constance, across from him, being afraid for her son, and the document on the coffee table, and 2 people in my living room, managing a crisis I did not know was happening. Eva. I think about what the room holds now, the knowledge that we survived it, that the crisis was real and we came through it. That my husband is well, and my children are growing, and my mother-in-law is 30 minutes away. And coming to dinner on Sundays, and saying my name without difficulty, and bringing her tomato plants in from Pluby before the first frost, because James told her I had a good south-facing window. Room holds all of it. The before and the after, the secret and its telling, the camera and its removal. I walk through it every day, and it is just my living room. It is mine again, which is what I needed it to be. Here is what I want to say to you. If you are a person who has found something in your house or your relationship or your family that revealed a truth you were not prepared for, Ifa, the truth you find is not always the truth you were looking for. I went looking for evidence of surveillance, and I found evidence of my husband's fear, Ishan. I went looking for a violation, and I found a marriage that had developed a gap I had not known to look for. I went looking for what Constance was doing, and I found what James had not been doing, which was bringing me the unexpected truth is not less true for being unexpected. It does not require you to abandon the legitimate grievance that led you to it. Constance violated my home, and that is real, and required accountability, regardless of what the camera captured. But the unexpected truth is often the more important one, because it is the truth that nobody planned to show you. It arrived without curation, without management, without the shape that people give to information before they offer it. It arrived as what it actually was. That kind of truth is rare. It is worth receiving carefully, even when receiving it is the hardest thing. Especially when receiving it is the hardest thing. So skier if this found you. Share it with someone navigating the gap between what they expected to find and what was actually there. Leave a comment. I read everyone. Geepsy. And if you have ever gone looking for evidence of one thing and found the thing that actually needed your attention, you already know that the search was worth it, not for what you expected, for what was true.